When my daughter Ann was 2.5 years old, I noticed she was getting more creative with her imagination. She would talk to people who weren't there, and she would play games through the house. It was as if there was another child there, but we didn't always have kids around, so I was fine with her having imaginary friends. One night, I had her in the bath. She was very focused on the bathroom door. She was waving and motioning towards herself as if she was asking someone to come into the bathroom. I asked her why she was doing this, and she told me her friend wouldn't come in. She wanted him to take a bath. I asked her why, and she said he was always really dirty. I asked her who this little boy was, and she told me she didn't know his name. But he lives here too, and he says where he sleeps it's cold and wet and he hates it. I told her it's okay. Maybe he will take a bath later. I got her out of the shower and put her into her jammies. She immediately went to the living room couch and opened a Sesame Street book and started telling her invisible friend all about Big Bird, Bert, and Ernie. Her dad shrugged this off, but it made me wonder where she came up with all of that. I told my mother-in-law about what happened at the bath time, and she made a call to a person we were renting our home from. She was a family friend who told me that it would make a lot of sense if she was communicating with the ghost of a little boy who had passed away on the property back in the early days, like way back when. She told me that some papers from possibly a journal had been recovered from the land, and it was written in them that a boy who lived on the land had fallen ill and died. Unexpectedly, the family, for unknown reasons, put the boy in a well, and she knew this to be true because human bones had been recovered from this well some 20 years prior. She told me this was all documented and found true to the best of her knowledge. I have always been an empath of sorts, and I knew to look into this because my daughter, although she is very charismatic to those she knows, is not an extrovert, and she has never put herself out there. So pretending to be super sweet to an imaginary friend was weird to me in a way. For the next few weeks, we experienced weird stuff. Like one day, I was spring cleaning and took a mirror off of my bedroom wall to put it on another wall for the time being. I washed it with Windex and covered it with a blanket, facing it towards the living room wall to get it out of the way before I put it back up. At this time, the neighbors were helping us rearrange the house, and their son was playing within in the living room. I hear an ear-shattering scream and run in to see my child bleeding from her hand, and the neighbor's son holding a huge pair of fabric scissors. I knew these scissors were put away in the computer desk that they were playing near. I took the little boy to his mama and asked her to take him home. She asked him where the scissors came from, and he said the other boy told him where the scissors were. When I went back and picked this mirror up and uncovered it, there was a little footprint in the bottom left-hand corner of the mirror. I compared my daughter's foot and the neighbor's kid's foot to the print, and it just wasn't the right size for either kid, from what I could tell. And the mirror never got moved by anyone else. I would try to wash the footprint off several times after that, but it never came off. Other things happened as well. Like I would hear Ann playing in her room and could swear I heard someone talking or laughing with her. But when I would go to the room to check on her, it stops. Then things would go missing for a few days, and then appear right where I knew they originally were. My animals wouldn't go into the upper level of the house sometimes, wouldn't go near N even though N never would hurt a living thing. I gave birth to another little girl in March of that year, and soon after we were home from the hospital, we found our home's rent was going to be raised, and we decided to move. We had a friend who rented her mobile home out to us, and we lived in there for a few months where we had more activity. My younger daughter, E, was just an infant and had her bassinet put up in between my side of the bed and the wall in my room. We had a sweet three-legged pitty named Sammy, who attached himself to E and slept on the foot of our bed to guard her bassinet while she slept. I also slept with my hand on the bassinet so I could feel her if she started waking up or if she stopped breathing. For several nights in a row, I would wake up, the bassinet rocking up and down along the side of my bed. This shook me at first, but I realized quickly that our little spirit was probably doing it. So I finally just asked him to stop and told him that E can play when she gets up. And it stopped. And never happened again. A close high school friend came around a lot, and I had told her all about the little boy, but she didn't believe me. One day In is running around the house with her little pink princess ball, and she says, "Aunt Kay, watch my friend." She tossed the ball down the hall, and for a few long minutes nothing happened. But eventually the ball starts slowly rolling back towards In from my bedroom at the end of the hall. Kay was then freaked out, but thankfully it didn't scare her enough to stop coming around. One day we had a bad storm and our electricity went out. On the first night, everything changed for me when it came to this boy, and I learned my lesson about inviting things to follow my family. We were all sleeping in my mom's living room, E and I laying on the couch, and In was on a blow-up mattress with her dad on the floor. E was very riled up and wouldn't go to sleep. She was around 9 months old at the time, and she had pulled herself up over the arm of the couch to see into the hall. I kept trying over and over to pull her down and make her lay down, but she kept getting herself up. He even began pointing and saying, "Bo." Finally, after fighting her to lay down for far too long, I patted her bottom to show my assertion. She began crying when suddenly I felt a terrifying rumble in the floor next to the couch, where my head would lay for the night, and a cold burst of air hit the back of my neck. Their father even felt this and shot up asking who was running through the room at 11 p.m. I freaked out. I grabbed E and ran to my mom's bedroom. I was streaming tears. Well, I told my mom what had just happened. She agreed with me. I told her that I felt threatened and this little boy probably didn't like my authority over E. She smudged us, circling us 3 times with the burning sage, and she asked me to tell the boy to go find his place with his family, to no longer follow my family. I did this with as much force as I could, and thankfully we never had experiences related to him again. From that point on, I have always had my mom, who is pagan and practices Wicca, come and bless my house, and I've always kept clear crystals in windows to help bring positive energy. Continuing to delve into the history of our native land, I become increasingly attracted to stories about mysterious and paranormal phenomenon. One day, a man appeared on the line with us and told a story about a crying child. We did not hesitate and are monitoring the screen of events of that very day. Our destination was Sour Lake, whose nature was sculpted in the shape of a perfect circle. A man shared with us a legend on this lake. According to a long-standing legend, children drowned heavily here in the past. As the parents shed tears of grief, the lake turned into sour. Sometimes people were close to this phenomenon and heard crying, but it was not a child's voice. Having written down this fascinating legend, we find evidence in search of evidence. Fate smiled upon us, and we found a woman who, while still young, returned from work one night, witnessing these inexplicable phenomenon. The time was approaching midnight. The woman walked past the lake when she suddenly heard a child crying. Without hesitation, she followed the sound. She thought that someone's child was lost somewhere. When she approached the lake, cry poetry, she walked around the entire shore, but did not find a single child. It was only when she returned home that her father told her the legend of the lake. She remembers the story 50 years later. Having recorded this unique testimony, historians entered the picture. The search for historical data was essential, as was personal observation of metric records. However, among them, there were only 4 cases of drowning children. In all records, the column of the case of death was drowning. The note, Sour Lake, was indicated. But one case, the last one in 1862, attracted particular attention. In this case, a 5-year-old child drowned. He was an orphan under the care of distant relatives. In another column, we learned that he was buried sometime after his death, since he could not be found for a long time. We are satisfied. I don't know why, but I was sure that it was this story that influenced generation after generation and still allows us to preserve its imprint on the lake in its favorable conditions. Perhaps people really hear the cry of a child 161 years later. It is scary and lonely. Or perhaps this is just a tragic story that has preserved popular rumor. It all started in 2019. I and 8 other people created an organization dedicated to the history of our city. The town is no larger, only 18,000 people plus adjacent villages. In one of the villages, a few months later, we were invited to the village where the landowner Zembrotsky lived. People told stories that they constantly see a landowner walking by the river, and that he cannot calm down until he drowns someone. Unfortunately, the landowner's estate itself was destroyed, and new houses had already appeared in its place. But we still walked along the river, and to be honest, I am a person who is skeptical about ghost stories. But walking there was unpleasant. I was tormented by some kind of unpleasant feeling of anxiety. History haunted us, and we started digging through the archives. As it turned out, in the 1820s, the landowner Zembrotsky actually lived there, who drowned in the river near the estate. But what became surprising was that 30 years later, in the 1850s, another person was drowning in the same place, and after a while, another and another. And so the last person who drowned there turned out to be my grandmother's nephew, about whom we don't talk much. I kind of knew that he drowned, but I didn't know where it happened. The details were the 2 children, 5 and 6-year-olds, were walking in winter, but then they went to the river, which was 1.5 kilometers from the house. A man passing by saw 2 floundering boys and ran to save them. He managed to grab one, and something pulled the other away. The second boy said that they went to look at his uncle, who was walking along the river, and he didn't remember what happened next. To this day, he does not tell the details of that day. This is where our research ends for now. I don't know if this was a paranormal phenomenon, or if there is an explanation for everything. But as a historian, I liked this story, because thanks to it, we have on our lips the name of people who died tragically. I'm not sure where to even begin with this, but it started with death. Going into my senior year, we lost a fellow student in a car accident. Pretty intense situation. I knew the girl named Taylor, and had seen her in the hall only a few weeks before and said hi. We were never great friends, but we had a few mutual and had spoken recently on chat about the guy we both knew named Eric. He was a few years older than us. After Taylor passed away, so tragically, and a lot of hurt was seeping into our community, a mutual friend was devastated at the news. He becomes important to the story, and I met with her family for the first time after her death. Taylor came to me in a dream that night. I was looking at her from across the desks when we never had a class together. I said, "Taylor, why are you here? You shouldn't be here." In my dream, my friend Jay turned around and said, "Who are you talking to?" Taylor was disappeared before I could point out she was clearly there. All of a sudden, I was in this local graveyard beneath this tree on a hill with her. She kept repeating in sobs, "I'm so scared. I'm so cold. I don't know why I'm here. Please help me. I want my mom. I want to go home." All I could do was try to get words out to comfort her or something, but nothing came of it, and then I woke up. There was a service a few weeks later. Majority of her school attended. She was driven away in a hearse with her family behind for a private burial in the local cemetery. I caught up with our friend Eric at the service, and he said they picked the most beautiful spot for her, on a hill under a tree. I had no way of knowing that, and I had dreamt of Taylor a few weeks prior to it. To this day, it seemed so real when she came to me in my dream, that she was really crying out for help to one of the few people that may have been able to hear her. I've had a few crazy experiences with paranormal happenings, and I'd be happy to share them. But it's always a somber feeling when I realize they aren't made up, that the fear I felt through every experience was real. The people around me felt real fear. This is going to be a long one, so buckle up. Title might sound ridiculous, but I'm being 100% serious. Also, please excuse any errors since English is not my first language. I was born in St. Petersburg, Russia, and that's where I spent most of my life. Moved to a different country at 16 years old. This happened when I was about 8 or 9 years old. Little disclaimer. At the time, I was really into all things supernatural, like many kids are. I was constantly reading about ghosts, aliens, vampires, you name it. And the fact that my father was being emotionally and physically abusive to both myself and my mother, parents divorced shortly after, makes me kind of doubt that what I saw and felt wasn't actually created by my brain. But nevertheless, I'm 100% sure it was not a dream, and I haven't experienced anything like that ever again, even in the most stressful, painful, and difficult moments of my life. I was in my room in our little flat in the center of the city, lying in my bed, lights off, playing with my stuffed animals, preparing to go to sleep. Not sure what hour of the night it was, but it must have been pretty late since my parents had gone to bed already. I was facing the wall. My bed was placed against it. On the opposite wall there was a window, under which stood my table and an office chair. I was calm, sleepy, and consumed by my own thoughts. Suddenly, I felt an incredible sense of terror, as if there was something sinister in the room behind me staring at me. It was so intense that I couldn't even find the courage to turn around to look at it, so I didn't. I laid with my eyes closed, heart pounding, until I finally managed to fall asleep. The very next night, it happened again. Same scenario, except this time I was facing the room. The edge of my bed was pretty tall to stop me from rolling off in my sleep. So I still couldn't see whatever was there. Just like the first time, I felt its presence, and I was terrified. My curiosity got the best of me. I raised my head and took a look. Floating in the center of the room, right above my chair, was something I lacked the vocabulary to describe with one word. It looked like a vaguely rectangular, though, weird thing. Roughly 2 meters tall and 1.5 meters wide, give or take. And it was glowing softly. It had a bright yellow center, also vaguely rectangular. And the rest of it was white, kind of like an egg. If I had to describe the texture, I would say it looked like a mix between a cloud and the surface of a body of water in constant motion. That's why I said its shape was vague, as it was constantly changing slightly and didn't have any sharp edges. The color also wasn't uniform, with some parts more opaque than others. Now that I've reread my probably very confusing description, it kind of sounded like I'm describing a portal, but it didn't feel inviting in the slightest. It felt like an independent entity with a mind of its own, and it felt hostile. That said, I looked at it for only a couple of seconds before I plunged my head back into the pillow, trying to hide behind the edge of the bed and closed my eyes. I don't exactly remember what happened after that, but what I assume and hope happened is that I fell asleep after a while, just like on the first night. It's been over 10 years now. I haven't seen or felt it again, and I really hope it stays that way. I still think about it from the time to time, though. What was it? Was it watching me? Was it trying to make its presence known? And where is it now? Could it still be attached to me? If it ever was? Did I hallucinate the whole thing? I've never had any other hallucinations that I know of, though. It's so puzzling. So I would really appreciate any insight anybody could give me on this. Thank you. Recently, there has been really weird things happening around me and my girlfriend. And there's been a lot of negative energy around us considering her parents are on the brink of divorce. And a lot of people say that all the yelling and fighting attracts evil things. And we start to argue too because of all the stress from those situations. Anyways, let me list these paranormal events. Her back door randomly opening in the extremely early morning and what seemed to be a gust of wind running out. We went to sleep on call one night, but I had never actually received a call, and she claimed to hear breathing heavy. I also do not remember any of this. One time, I'm not sure if it was a prank or something related, very recent, a no-caller ID called her and said they were watching her. And I asked if she still worked at the taco place she does work at. It was a man's voice, and she doesn't have any guy friends. A few nights ago, there was repeated tapping on her bedroom window after that call. The lights outside are motion activated, so they would have turned on if there was something out there. She was too afraid to get up and go look. Her blinds get flipped down every time she leaves the room. She falls asleep with her TV on and it turns off now randomly in the middle of the night. This one actually happened to me. I had turned on my TV late at night and it looked and sounded as if something had slapped the TV, as if they were trying to get it to turn off. Yesterday, her mom heard late at night a grown man sigh in the living room. Very distinct, and there are no men in the house. The other night we fell asleep. I do not remember answering her call to fall asleep on a call with her. This night, actually, I had left Instagram open on my phone and answered her call. The Instagram chat themed was changed to a specific, kid toyish one, as well as a blank message set randomly at 3:06 a.m., which I was dead asleep to her. So, a whole different app? These things happened with the same minute. Is it possible we have a demon stalking us or something? Just curious. I'm not sure, and it's starting to bother us. I am someone who doesn't believe in supernatural. Today, I've experienced the worst in my life. I literally saw myself smiling at me. I got home at exactly 2:44 a.m. today, and it happens that my family aren't home. They're on vacation, and I decided to stay. I sat and ate snacks for 10 minutes or something in our kitchen, and when I decided to go wash and sleep, I saw myself smiling at me. My mom bought a huge mirror looking like an antique, and God's know where she bought it, and placed it in our kitchen near the stairs. I was going up, but I decided to take selfies. After checking the selfies in front of the mirror, I noticed that something was off. When I looked at the mirror, I literally saw myself smiling. It took 3 seconds, for me to process what was happening, and I ran out of the house. I'm really scared to go in and sleep. I'm currently on our balcony outside. Please, someone help me.
I live inside my own world of make-believe. Kids screaming in the cradles, profanities. I see the world through ice covered in ink and bleach. Cross